This video shows how to put the handles that go into the folding plate assembly. You use the handles anytime you fold the car up, anytime you unfold it, or roll it around on two wheels. Okay, here's the parts you're going to need. These parts are pulled directly from the box that contains the kit for the folding plate assembly. So you're going to need a hacksaw to cut the brass rod. You're going to need a wood saw to cut the wood to length. We provide the wood in the proper thickness and width, but you're going to have to cut it to length. Some sandpaper, a bench sander works even better. You're going to need a drill and some drill bits. Small bench top drill press works very well for this. Two-part epoxy, a hammer to tap the brass rods in. Wood stain, recommend using the same wood stain that was used for the limbs. Some polyurethane to seal it, and a brush to go along with it. And also lastly, the drawing comes in handy. The drawing that comes with the kit for the folding plate assembly has one sheet that shows how these go together. Okay, these handles are not rocket science. What we did was we just looked at how do people put the handles on custom-made knives. And we just mimicked the same way. This has worked out very well for us. It's reliable, sturdy, and it can be made with commonly available tools. So let's get started. Here I'm looking at my drawing, and I'm looking at how long does the wood scales need to be. In this case, 100 millimeters or 10 centimeters is the length of this. Also, you can look at this as basically 3.9 inches. Okay, so I need to take my pieces of wood and cut 4 lengths, each a total of 100 millimeters long. Okay, we have our scales cut to length. Now we're going to mark them to drill holes that we're going to place the pins in. One thing I do is I line up, I use the center, basically the bottom part. You got the two sides. It's a little easier to line it up, a little more defined of what is indeed the center. Now these two parts are laser cut, so the holes on one are going to be identical to the spacing of the holes in the other. Mark all 3 holes without the part moving. This is the location of these holes is probably the most challenging part of building these handles. The rest of it is relatively forgiving. Okay, let's get drilling. Okay, our next step is to cut our brass rod. We need to determine how long each piece will be. So I measure between my 2 wooden scales and my aluminum, all 3 pieces together, add about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters, and cut 6 pieces of brass rod for the 2 handles. Okay, our drilling was pretty good. See how our faces line up. It looks like we're in good shape to go forward. Let's take this all apart and get sanding. Okay, keep in mind for our sanding that we want to leave one face untouched, because one face of each of these wooden scales is going to bond against the aluminum part. Okay, so we're going to not sand any of these edges and sand all the other ones and take up any pencil marks, anything like that. We're starting off with kind of a more aggressive sandpaper or a belt sander. This is just a Harbor Freight unit. It comes in very handy for simple work like that. Let's get started. I don't have any excess of edges or mismatch. Looks like I'm good to move forward with epoxy. This is just a regular 2-part epoxy. Actually, you might bias towards a longer working time. Give you a little more flexibility as you put things together. Being that my holes are a little bit oversized, I'm applying some epoxy to the pins as I put them in. Some of you true woodworkers might actually have some better methods doing this. Feel free to send us a email on any other tips that you have for making this easier or maybe even a little bit better. We do appreciate feedback from the builder community. Again, I'm making sure my pins are protruding part way through both faces. Okay, all that remains is some clamping. It's a good idea to fit check your clamps beforehand. Make sure that they, you can work around the rivets that protrude through the top of each scale. And just squeeze it down. Looks like this part is done. And we're going to let this sit overnight and we'll pick it up tomorrow. Okay, we're back. This has had the opportunity to take a sit overnight. Let's take a look. Looks like things are not bad. It's a little on the messy side, but we should be able to go ahead and clean that up. Okay. Belt sander works pretty well for this, but obviously you can't get to the inside, so we're going to have to do that by hand. So I started off with the file on the inside in the areas that were really heavy with the epoxy. Most of the finish work I did with a 60 grit sandpaper, kind of a more aggressive sandpaper, but that worked out quite well. I went over the aluminum with the Scotch-Brite, and I think that things will look like we're ready for stain. Okay, in this case I'm using the same stain that we used for the bamboo limbs. Okay, applying the stain over the ends of the brass rod, I'm not overly concerned if it gets on the aluminum. It cleans up very easily off of both. The wood is the porous part. That's what absorbs the stain. Again, the longer we leave it on, the darker it is. So I'm going to finish up these two handles. We'll let them sit overnight, and then we're going to apply the polyurethane. Okay, that should do it. I'm going to find a place for this to dry. One thing I did do is I covered up just the very ends, made sure that any sort of glue joint is sealed by the polyurethane. That way any sort of moisture, just an extra moisture barrier. But this is turning out. I'm going to apply 2 more coats of the same, and this part will be done. So catch you in our next video. Thank you, and bye now.